Welcome to Heartfelt Revenge Stories. My grandfather pushed my 10-year-old daughter off her chair at the Christmas table. "That seat is for my real grandkid," he said. "Get out." She hit the floor in front of 14 relatives. And nobody moved. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I said 4 words. My mother dropped her wine glass. My grandfather went pale. 3 days later he received a certified letter and his hands wouldn't stop shaking. "My name is Sarah. I'm 34 years old. I'm a single mother and an ER nurse. And this is the story of how I stopped begging my family for a seat at their table and started building my own." Please subscribe and like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. Let me take you back to the morning of December 25th, the day that changed everything. Most mornings started the same way. 5:30 in the morning in a cottage the size of a 2-car garage, tucked behind my parents' house on Elm Street. I'd stand barefoot on a cold tile, pouring coffee into the only mug that didn't have a chip, while the baseboard heater ticked and groaned like it was personally offended by December. Sophie would still be asleep in the next room. 10 years old that winter. Brown hair fanned across the pillow. One arm wrapped around a stuffed bear so threadbare you could see the stitching through its belly. She'd had that bear since the day I brought her home from foster care. 3 years old, silent, gripping my index finger like it was the last solid thing in the world. 7 years later she wasn't silent anymore. She drew constantly. Birds, houses, families at dinner tables. She read chapter books 2 grades above her level. And every few weeks, usually at bedtime, she'd look up at me and ask the same question. "Mommy, am I really yours forever?" Every single time I gave her the same answer. "Yes, baby. Forever and always." I'd been paying my father $1,100 a month to live in that cottage. A bank transfer. First of every month, no exceptions. I had 84 screenshots on my phone. Every single payment timestamp going back 7 years. I kept them because I'm an ER nurse and ER nurses document everything. That's what we do. We chart. We note. We timestamp. My father said a lease wasn't necessary. "We're family," he told me. "We don't need paper." I believed him for 7 years. I need you to remember that number. 84 payments. Because it's going to matter later. Christmas at the Henderson house was a production, not a celebration. My father directed it like a man who'd spent 30 years managing a corporate office and never learned to stop managing. Every year, the long oak table is set for 14 to 16. Good china. Cloth napkins folded into something architectural. A seating chart unwritten but absolute. Michael Henderson at the head. My mother Catherine to his left. My older sister Emma to his right with her daughter Claire beside her. Close enough to Grandpa that he could cut her meat and tell everyone how gifted she was. Claire was 8. She sat with the adults. Sophie and I sat at the far end near the kitchen door where the draft came through. And you could hear the dishwasher running. Every year. If you're wondering whether the seating was accidental, it wasn't. Nothing my father did was accidental. Does this sound familiar? Have you ever felt like an outsider at your own family table? Keep watching. This is where it gets real. 2 days before Christmas my mother called. Not to ask what Sophie wanted for a gift. Not to check if Sophie had grown out of last year's dress. She called to say, "Don't let Sophie wear anything too flashy. Emma just bought Claire a new dress. And you know how Claire gets if she's not the center of attention." I pressed my tongue against the back of my teeth and said, "Sure, Mom." That night, I picked out a simple red sweater for Sophie. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror, smoothed the front with both palms and asked me, "Mommy, can I sit next to Claire this year at the big table?" My heart broke a little right there. I told her I'd try. I should have known then. The seating chart wasn't about chairs. It was about who counted. And in my father's house, my daughter had never counted. Christmas Day, 4:17 p.m. The sky had gone the color of wet cement, and a thin snow was coming down, the kind that doesn't stick, but makes everything look like it's inside a snow globe. Pretty and sealed. Trapped. Sophie carried a rolled-up piece of paper in both hands, held out in front of her like a candle at a church procession. She'd been working on it for 2 weeks. A painting on thick watercolor stock titled Our Family Christmas. Every person in the family drawn in bright, careful strokes. Grandpa, Grandma, Aunt Emma, Claire. even great-grandmother Margaret in her wheelchair. Everyone is smiling. Everyone at the same table. She wanted to give it to my father before dinner. He met us at the front door. The pine wreath smelled sharp. The porch light made the snow look gold. My father looked at Sophie, then past her. The way you look past a piece of furniture you've stopped noticing. He gave her a short nod. No hug. No Merry Christmas, Sophie. Nothing. Then Claire ran up behind him and the whole man changed. He crouched down, arms wide. There's my girl. Look at that dress. You are a princess. He held Claire for a good 10 seconds. I counted every single one of them. Inside, Emma was arranging place cards on the oak table. I scanned for Sophie's name. It wasn't there. The main table had 14 settings. At the back wall near the kitchen door, someone had unfolded a metal card table, the kind you use for poker, and set it with a single plate, a single fork, a paper napkin, one chair. Claire was 8 and sat with the adults. Sophie was 10 and sat alone at a card table behind the kitchen door. I leaned toward my mother in the hallway. Mom, Sophie can sit at the main table, right? She's 10. Vivian didn't look at me. Don't make this a thing, Sarah. Dinner was halfway done when it happened. I'd been watching Sophie through the kitchen doorway, alone at that card table, eating quietly. Her painting was rolled up beside her plate because she hadn't found the right moment to give it to my father. She kept glancing at the main table. At Claire laughing. At my father carving seconds of ham for Claire's plate while telling a story about her ballet recital. Then Sophie stood up. She picked up her painting, walked to the main table, and slid into the one empty chair. The seat meant for my cousin James, who hadn't shown. It was next to me. She sat down, unrolled the painting on the tablecloth and smiled. I made this for everyone, she said. My father set down his carving knife. The room didn't go quiet. It went vacuum sealed. 14 forks stopped moving at the same time. He stood. He walked around the table. He stood over my daughter. That seat is for family. His voice was level. Informational. Like he was reading a policy from the bank where he used to work. She is family, Dad, I said. He didn't look at me. He looked down at Sophie. That seat is for my real grandkid. Get out. His hand closed on the shoulder of Sophie's red sweater. He pulled. Not a punch, not a slap. A yank. Sharp. Deliberate. The way you pull a dog off a couch. Sophie's body twisted. The chair legs scraped. She went off the seat sideways and hit the hardwood floor with a sound I will hear for the rest of my life. The painting landed face down beside her. 5 seconds of silence. I counted them the way I count seconds between a crash and a code in the ER. 5 full seconds. 14 adults. Nobody stood. Vivian looked at her plate. Emma cut a piece of ham. And Sophie didn't scream. She looked up at me from the floor, eyes wide, and whispered one word. Mommy. I don't remember standing up. I remember being up. I remember the feel of the napkin leaving my lap, the scrape of my chair, and then I was already moving. I didn't shout. I didn't lunge. 7 years of ER training will do that to you. When the worst thing in the room is happening, you don't scream. You act. Your hands go steady. Your voice drops. I crouched down, slid my arms under Sophie, and lifted her. She was shaking. Small, fast tremors. The kind of shaking a child does when her body understands something her mind hasn't caught up to yet. When she doesn't understand what just happened, but every nerve ending does. I held her against my chest, one hand on the back of her head. Then I looked at my father. He was still standing. His hand was still half raised, fingers open, like the ghost of Sophie's sweater was still in his grip. I said 4 words. We are done here. Behind me I heard a sharp crack. Glass on wood. My mother's wine glass had slipped from her hand onto the table. Red wine pulled across the white cloth like an ink blot. My father's face went the color of the snow outside. I picked up Sophie's painting from the floor, took our coats from the hallway closet, and walked out the front door. Nobody followed us. The snow had picked up. It stuck to Sophie's eyelashes. She whispered into my neck. Are we going home? We're going home, I said. Our home. Not their house. Our home. In the car, engine running, heat blasting, I pulled up the back of Sophie's sweater. A red mark, already darkening, ran across her lower back where she'd hit the chair leg on the way down. I took 3 photos. Timestamp December 25th, 7:42 p.m. Then I sat in the driveway of our cottage for 10 full minutes, engine idling, snow collecting on the windshield, and made 3 decisions that would change everything. If you're sitting on the edge of your seat right now, hit that like button. Because what happens next is where this mama stops begging and starts fighting back. Don't go anywhere. By 9 o'clock that night, my phone had become a weapon pointed at me. 11 missed calls, 23 text messages. And every single one of them would prove what I already knew. The real battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. My family was about to learn that I'm an ER nurse. And we document everything. Stay tuned for part 2, where the paperwork becomes the weapon. The lies start unraveling, and I discover something that changes everything about who actually owns the roof over our heads. By 9 o'clock that night on Christmas, my phone had become a weapon pointed right at me. 11 missed calls, 23 text messages. Every single one landed like a punch that I wasn't supposed to dodge. I read every single one and I screenshot every single one because that's what you do when the gaslighting starts. You save the receipts before someone tells you it never happened. My mother first. You ruined Christmas. Your father barely touched her. She's being dramatic and so are you. My sister Emma. Sophie slipped off the chair by herself. I saw the whole thing. Stop twisting it into something it wasn't. My Aunt Margaret. Michael didn't mean it like that. He's under a lot of stress. Come back tomorrow and apologize. Be the bigger person. 23 messages. Not one of them asked if Sophie was okay. Not one. I set the phone face down on the kitchen counter and ran Sophie a bath. I sat on the closed toilet lid and read her 2 chapters of her book while the bathroom filled with steam and the smell of the lavender soap she liked. She was quiet. Not the scared quiet from the floor. Thinking quiet. A processing quiet. At bedtime, she looked up at me from her pillow and said something that broke my heart all over again. Is Grandpa mad because I'm not really his? I brushed the hair off her forehead. My hands were shaking but I kept my voice steady. You are really mine. That's what matters. You will always matter to me. She fell asleep holding that threadbare bear with both arms, like it was the only solid thing left in the world. I went to the kitchen table, opened my laptop and created a Google document. Title: Incident Log. Henderson Family. I sat there until 1 in the morning, typing every incident I could remember from the last 7 years. Dates. Quotes. Who was present? Things said to Sophie. Things said about Sophie when she was in the next room. 7 years of notes organized by year. 7 years of a pattern I'd somehow convinced myself wasn't a pattern. I didn't reply to a single message that night. I had screenshots. That was enough. 7 years of documentation. Do you see where this is going? As I didn't know yet. But my fingers on that keyboard? That was the beginning of the end for all the lies. Keep watching. December 26th, 8:14 a.m. Sophie was still asleep when the knocking started. Not a polite knock. The flat of a palm against the cottage door, hard enough to rattle the chain lock. I knew who it was before I looked through the peephole. My father stood on the step in his good overcoat, breath clouding in the cold. No casserole dish. No apology face. Just a man who'd spent 3 decades telling people what to do, and wasn't about to stop now. I opened the door 6 inches and kept my body between him and the hallway to Sophie's room. He didn't say good morning. You embarrassed me in front of my family. His voice was the same one he used on bank tellers who miscounted. Controlled. Clipped. But with a current running underneath. A current of rage barely leashed. That girl needs to learn her place. And so do you. Her name is Sophie, I said. And she's your granddaughter. You pushed a child. I barely touched her. He leaned forward. She's not even blood, Sarah. She doesn't. This conversation is over, I said. My voice was so quiet it scared me. Do not come to this door again until you're ready to apologize to Sophie. I closed the door. Deadbolt. Chain. He knocked again. Louder. Then his voice came through the wood the way sound comes through hospital walls at 3 in the morning. Muffled but unmistakable. This is my property. I can come whenever I want to my own property. I pulled out my phone, opened voice memos and held it 6 inches from the door. He kept going for 47 seconds. 47 seconds of my property, my house, not even blood, and ungrateful. I stood there, phone steady, counting Mississippi the way I count compressions during a code. Timestamp: December 26, 10:14 a.m. He called it his property. I had it recorded. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a question I'd never thought to ask started forming. Whose property was it really? I need you to understand something. Christmas wasn't the first time. It was just the time he used his hands. The cruelty had always been there. It was just quieter. The kind you can talk yourself out of noticing if you try hard enough. Sophie's 5th birthday. My father forgot. Not forgot the way busy people forget. Forgot the way you forget something that was never on your calendar. Forgot the way you forget something that doesn't matter to you. Harper's 5th birthday. 6 months later. He rented a bounce castle and a snow cone machine and posted 11 photos on Facebook caption, "My little princess turns 5. Ah, that hurt. Every single time. My sister Emma received $3,000 a year from our grandmother's education trust. Money Grandma Margaret set up for all great-grandchildren. I assumed Sophie was included. I never checked. That would matter later. That would matter so much later. When I adopted Sophie, I was 27 years old. Single. Fresh out of nursing school with $40,000 in student debt, and a one-bedroom apartment that smelled like the restaurant below it. My family's reaction was not what the brochures prepare you for. My father, at least marry someone first. My sister Emma, you're going to ruin your life. My mother, quieter but somehow worse. What if she has problems? She meant Sophie. Like Sophie was a defect. Like she was something that came with a warranty. The year Sophie turned 6, my mother said something in front of Sophie at Thanksgiving, between the cranberry sauce and the green beans. "Well, she doesn't look like us, does she?" I said nothing. I cut my turkey and said nothing because I was living in my father's cottage, paying my father's rent, and I was terrified that if I made noise, Sophie would lose the only extended family she had. 7 years. 84 rent payments. I thought I was buying Sophie a place in this family. But you can't buy a seat at a table where you were never welcome. You're just paying for the privilege of being tolerated. And I was so busy paying I forgot to check who actually owned the house. Wait, who does own the house? 'Cause I didn't know. Not yet. But I was about to find out. And when I did, everything shifted. Hit that like button if you want to know what I discovered. Because this is where the story goes from heartbreaking to absolutely mind-blowing. December 27th. I called Grandma Margaret. She lived at Maplewood Assisted Living, 40 minutes east. In a single room with a quilt on the bed and 3 decades of school photos on the wall. 82 years old, arthritic hands, sharp mind, and the kind of quiet authority that comes from teaching 3rd graders for 30 years. She never needed to raise her voice because every child in the room already knew she meant business. I told her what happened. All of it. The card table. The chair. The floor. The sound. That sound that lives in my nightmares now. She went silent. Not the silence of confusion. The silence of a woman counting to 10 before she speaks. So the words come out precise. "He pushed Sophie onto the floor," she said. "Yes, ma'am." Another silence. 10 seconds. I counted. "Then Dana, I need to ask you something." "Wait, that's not my name. Let me back up. I realize I've been calling myself Sarah. But there's something else I need to tell you. I've been protecting parts of this. And now I'm going to tell you the whole truth. Because the truth is what sets you free. Actually, let me keep the story flowing with the names I've chosen for now. Margaret's the grandmother who changes everything. Are you and Sophie still living in the cottage behind the house? Yes. And who told you that house belongs to your father? My stomach dropped. Everyone says it's his. He inherited it, didn't he? The sound Grandma Margaret made was not a laugh. It was the ghost of one. I never transferred the deed, sweetheart. That house is still mine. Every brick. Every shingle. Every inch of that cottage your father charges you rent for. He has been living in my house for 15 years and telling everyone it's his. I sat down on the edge of my bed. The room tilted slightly the way it does when a patient you thought was stable suddenly isn't. When the monitors start screaming and you realize everything you thought was solid is about to crack. "I'm calling Marcus," she said. You remember Marcus Webb from your college? He handles my estate. I did remember Marcus. Trust and estate attorney. Quiet. Thorough. The kind of lawyer who reads footnotes. Grandma, what are you going to? Nobody pushes my great-grandbaby and keeps living in my house, she said. Nobody. She hung up. Clean and final. The way she used to close her classroom door after the last student filed out. And the question I'd been forming since my father's voice came through that door had just been answered. Whose property is it really? It's hers. It's always been hers. Marcus Webb called me the next morning at 8:15, and what he told me changed the trajectory of everything. $92,400. That's how much I paid in rent to a man who had zero legal right to collect it. Zero. And that's just the beginning. Because while I was discovering the house wasn't his, Grandma Margaret was discovering something else. Something about the trust. Something about where the money went. Something about my sister. In part 3, we're going to pull back the curtain on years of theft, manipulation, and lies that have been hiding in plain sight. And I'm going to show you exactly what happens when a mother who documents everything gets access to a lawyer who knows how to read bank statements. Stay tuned. Marcus Webb called me the next morning at 8:15 a.m. He didn't waste time on small talk. Lawyers who handle estates for 82-year-old women on a mission don't have time for pleasantries. I pulled the county land records online last night, he said. His voice was methodical, steady, the voice of someone who deals in facts, not feelings. 14 Elm Street. The deed is recorded in the name of Margaret A. Wilson. There's no transfer. No quitclaim deed. No life estate. Nothing. Your father has zero legal ownership of that property. I stared at the wall above my kitchen sink at a water stain shaped like a comma that I'd been meaning to paint over for 3 years. He's been an occupant, Marcus continued. Essentially a tenant without a lease. And since he represented to you that the cottage was his property and collected rent from you, we have a situation. What kind of situation? My voice sounded small. Fragile. Unjust enrichment. You've been paying rent to a person who had no legal right to collect it. 7 years. $1,100 a month. Sarah, that's $92,400. I set my coffee down because my hand wasn't steady enough to hold it. $92,400. I did the math differently in my head. That was 7 years of overnight shifts. That was a holiday I worked so Sophie could have birthday presents. That was the time I picked up a double on Thanksgiving because the rent was due on the 1st and my checking account had $800 in it. All of it paid to a man who didn't own a single brick of that house. $92,000. For a house that was never his. And that's just the money. Wait until you hear about the trust. This is where it gets dark. Really dark. Keep going. Marcus sent the scan deed to my email 10 minutes later. I opened it on my phone. There it was, recorded at the county clerk's office in neat black type. Margaret A. Wilson. Clear. Permanent. Undeniable. I saved it in 3 places. I was an ER nurse. I documented everything. And I was just getting started. The deed was the first crack. The trust was the canyon. Marcus called again that afternoon. His voice had a different quality now. Not angry, but precise in a way that made my skin prickle. I requested the account records from the bank that held your grandmother's education trust. A revocable trust she created in 2016, funded with $120,000, designated for the educational benefit of all great-grandchildren of Margaret Wilson. I held my breath. She named your father as trustee because he was, in her words, good with money. I heard Marcus turning pages. The sound of evidence being assembled. The original balance was $120,000, he said. The current balance is $11,340. I pulled the phone away from my ear and looked at it. The way you look at a machine that's just given you a reading you don't trust. Where did the rest go? I whispered. 14 withdrawals between 2019 and 2024. Every single one is coded as educational expenses. Emma Thornton Hayes. He paused. Sarah. Emma attends public school. There's no tuition. The room went very, very quiet. $18,660 withdrawn in Emma's daughter's name for an education that was free. I thought about Emma's kitchen renovation 2 years ago. The Cancun trip. The designer bags that showed up in her Instagram stories with captions like, "Treat yourself because I deserve it." I thought about how she'd looked at Sophie that Christmas sitting at the card table. How she never once moved to help her. "And Sophie?" I asked. My voice was cracking now. "There's not a single withdrawal in Sophie's name?" Another pause. Longer this time. "In fact, Sophie isn't listed as a beneficiary at all. The trust says all great-grandchildren. But your father as trustee never added her. He had the administrative duty to include her. He chose not to. $18,660 gone. And my daughter's name was nowhere in the document. Not because she wasn't eligible. Because my father made sure she wasn't." I closed my eyes. I breathed. And for the first time since Christmas, I felt something colder than anger. Something sharper. Something that felt like clarity mixed with rage. Marcus set up a three-way call that evening. Me, him, and Grandma Margaret. I sat at the kitchen table with the laptop open and Sophie's door closed, the sound of her audiobook playing softly down the hall. Some chapter book about a girl who befriends a dragon. The kind of story where things turn out right. I wished I lived in a story like that. Marcus walked Grandma Margaret through everything. The deed. The rent. The trust. The 14 withdrawals. The missing beneficiary. He spoke the way he always did, level precise, like he was reading a lab report. Like he was presenting facts that spoke for themselves. When he finished, Grandma Margaret went quiet. I watched the clock on the microwave. 15 seconds. I was counting again. In the ER, you learn that silence can mean two things. A patient crashing or a patient deciding to fight. Then she spoke and her voice was so calm it could have frosted glass. "Marcus, I need 3 things done before New Year's." She was putting on her teacher's voice. The one that meant no arguments. No discussion. Just action. First, freeze the trust today. No more withdrawals by anyone. Not my son. Not my daughter-in-law. Not anyone. Second, I want a full accounting from Michael. Every dollar. Every receipt. He has 30 days. Third, prepare an amendment. The sole beneficiary of the education trust, effective immediately, is Sophie Marie Thornton. Marcus said. "Yes, ma'am." "And the house?" Grandma Margaret's voice didn't shake. It sharpened, like a knife being drawn across stone. "They've been living in my house for 15 years without paying me a cent and charging my granddaughter rent. That ends now. Give them a proper 30-day notice to vacate. Certified mail." I started to say something. A question. A doubt. A what if. "Your mother watched a grown man push a child onto the floor, Sarah, and she picked up her fork." Grandma Margaret cut me off. "I'm sure." I heard the click of her hanging up. Clean and final. The way she used to close her classroom door after the last student filed out. The trust was frozen. The clock was ticking, and I hadn't raised my voice once. Frozen. Amended. Certified. Do you feel the power shifting? Because this is where the mama who couldn't even speak up at Christmas started speaking in documents, in law, in fact. And facts, my friends, don't care about your feelings. They just destroy lies. Are you with me? Hit like if you're seeing how this unfolds. December 29th, 4 a.m. Sophie was asleep. The cottage was quiet. My kitchen table had transformed into a command center. I'm a triage nurse. When trauma comes in, you don't panic. You organize. You assess what's bleeding, what's broken, what can wait, and what can't. Then you move one task at a time until the board is clear. I applied the same logic to my father. Folder 1. The manila one. Physical copies. 3 printed photos of Sophie's bruise with timestamps. A printed copy of the medical report from Dr. Patel, Sophie's pediatrician, who documented contusion on lower back consistent with blunt impact against furniture edge during our visit on December 26. Folder 2. Digital. Backed up to the clouds. The Google Doc incident log, now 23 pages covering 7 years. 23 screenshots of text messages from Christmas night, each with timestamps and sender names. The 47-second voice memo of my father at the door. 84 Venmo payment confirmations totaling $92,400. The scanned county deed. The trust account statements show 14 unauthorized withdrawals. 7 items. 7 years of silence organized into evidence. I called Dr. Amara Singh's office when they opened at 9. A pediatric counselor who specialized in children processing family disruption. First available appointment. January 2nd. Marcus emailed me 3 drafts by noon. The 30-day notice to vacate. A demand letter for full trust accounting. The trust amendment naming Sophie as sole beneficiary. Ready for Grandma Margaret's notarized signature. I printed everything. Stacked it. Clipped it. Then I sat back in my chair and realized something I'd never felt before in that cottage. I wasn't asking anyone for permission. I wasn't tiptoeing around anyone's ego. I wasn't measuring my words against the cost of rent. For the first time in 7 years I was just acting. It felt like breathing after being underwater. It felt like coming up for air after drowning. It felt like the moment before everything changes. 7 years of silence. 1 night of documentation. And suddenly, she's not the victim anymore. She's the architect. She's the one building the case. She's the one in control. If you can feel the energy shifting, smash that like button. Because in the next part we're going to see what happens when all of this evidence hits the family. And trust me, they will not see it coming. Stay with me. December 30th. The call I should have made 5 days earlier. The call I should have made years ago if I'm being honest. But that's a different kind of reckoning. I'm about to report my own father to Child Protective Services. And while I'm doing that, my grandmother is signing documents that are about to dismantle his entire world. By New Year's Eve, my father will have received a certified letter that makes his hands shake. My mother will be crying softly on her knees. And my sister? She's going to have to choose between defending her lies or facing the evidence. In part 4, we're going to see the paperwork become the weapon. The evidence becomes the shield. And a family meeting that's about to blow everything wide open. You don't want to miss what happens when a grandmother takes off her kid gloves. And a mother finally stops protecting everyone but her daughter. See you in part 4. December 30th. The call I should have made 5 days earlier. The call I should have made years ago if I'm being honest. But that's a different kind of reckoning. Marcus had walked me through it the night before. An adult used physical force on a 10-year-old child, causing her to fall and sustain visible bruising. Under the law, that meets the threshold for a report to DCF. Department of Children and Families. You can file as the parent, he said. I sat at the kitchen table at 10 a.m. with the hotline number written on a post-it. My hands were shaking. Not from fear. From the weight of 7 years pressing down on a phone that weighed 6 ounces. Lily was at the other end of the cottage, cross-legged on the living room rug, painting a snow owl with her watercolors. I could see the back of her head from where I sat. Brown hair. Still messy from sleep. Bent in concentration. Reporting your own father to Child Protective Services is not something they prepare you for in nursing school. It's not something anyone prepares you for anywhere. The intake worker was patient. I gave dates. Descriptions. The medical report reference number from Dr. Patel. I described the bruise. The chair. The 14 witnesses who did nothing. I submitted a written follow-up statement by email that afternoon with the photos attached. Case opened. Confirmation number recorded. Investigation timeline, 30 to 45 days. A caseworker would contact Michael Thornton for an interview. I set the phone down and looked across the room at Sophie, who was holding her paintbrush up to the light, checking the color. She didn't know I just made that call. She didn't need to. That was my job. To make the calls she couldn't make. So she could keep painting snow owls in the safety of a warm room. If you've ever held a phone in your hand knowing you should have dialed years ago, you understand exactly what that moment cost. And this is just the beginning. Because while I'm filing reports, my grandmother is about to send certified mail that's going to hit like a bomb. This is the part where the mama stops playing defense and goes on offense. Are you ready? Because it gets intense from here. Keep watching. New Year's Eve. While most of Connecticut was uncorking champagne and watching the ball get ready to drop, Marcus Webb was standing at the post office in downtown Hartford, holding a white envelope stamped with the words that were about to dismantle my father's entire self-image. Certified mail. Return receipt requested. Inside was a formal 30-day notice to vacate addressed to Michael and Catherine Thornton for the property at 14 Elm Street. The language was clean, almost gentle in its precision. Property owned by Margaret A. Wilson. No lease agreement exists between the parties. Occupants are hereby notified to vacate the premises within 30 days of receipt. A process server delivered a duplicate copy in person that same afternoon. Belt and suspenders, Marcus said. You don't leave room for I never got it. A separate envelope went out the same day. A demand letter to Michael Thornton in his capacity as trustee of the Wilson Education Trust, requiring a full accounting of all withdrawals within 30 days. The letter referenced breach of fiduciary duty in language that was polite the way a scalpel is polite. Technically civil. Functionally devastating. At 3 p.m., Marcus drove to Maplewood Assisted Living. Grandma Margaret signed the trust amendment at the table in her room, witnessed by Marcus and notarized by a mobile notary. Sole beneficiary, effective immediately. Sophie Marie Thornton. I spent New Year's Eve on the couch with Sophie. We ate popcorn and watched the countdown on TV. She fell asleep with her head on my lap at 11:40 p.m., 20 minutes before midnight. I pulled a blanket over her and listened to the muffled sound of fireworks from somewhere down the street. Is next year going to be better, Mommy? She'd asked before dozing off. I stroked her hair. Next year is going to be ours. Somewhere across town, a certified letter was sitting in my father's mailbox, ticking like a clock, counting down the minutes until his world imploded. January 2nd. Marcus texted me at 10:09 a.m. return receipt signed. 10:07 a.m. He has it. 13 minutes later my phone rang. I didn't need to look at the screen. I could feel the vibration pattern. The way you feel a storm system moving in. Heavy. Electric. Inevitable. My father's voice came through at a pitch I'd never heard from him before. Not the controlled bank manager tone. Not the quiet threat from the cottage door. This was something cracked open. Raw. Wild. Your grandmother is senile. This is my house. I have lived in that house for 15 years. It is mine. You turned a confused old woman against her own family, and I will sue every last one of you. I let him finish. Then you'll need to discuss that with Marcus Webb, I said quietly. His number is on the letter. I hung up. 10:35. My mother's turn. The crying was already in progress when I picked up. How could you do this to us? We're your parents. We took you in when you had nothing. We let you live in the cottage. You charged me rent for a house that wasn't yours. I have every Venmo receipt. I hung up. 11 o'clock, my sister. I saw the name on the screen and let it go to voicemail. The message was 40 seconds of threats about lawyers, elder abuse, and how I was going to pay for this. I saved it, filed it, moved on. That afternoon, Marcus told me Michael had called Grandma Margaret directly. Screamed at her for 4 minutes straight. About disrespect. About family loyalty. About how she was destroying everything. Grandma Margaret waited for him to finish, then said in the same voice she'd used to quiet a classroom of 8-year-olds. I'm 82, Michael. Not stupid. You have 29 days. She hung up first. The calls didn't work, so they switched tactics. First week of January, my sister sent a group text to every relative in the family. 23 people, including cousins I hadn't spoken to since Obama was in office. I know because my cousin Rachel forwarded it to me within the hour with a single comment. Thought you should see this. The text read, just wanted everyone to know what's happening. Sarah is manipulating Grandma Margaret, who, as many of you know, has been declining mentally. She is trying to steal the family home and turn Grandma against Mom and Dad. Grandma has signs of dementia and doesn't understand what she's signing. Please call her and talk some sense into her before this goes further. This is breaking Mom's heart. Every sentence. A lie pressed flat and smooth. The way you iron a crease into a shirt you want to look respectable. I screenshotted it. Filed it. Then my Aunt Linda called. Linda, who texted me on Christmas night to say Michael didn't mean it, be the bigger person. Her voice was careful now. Testing. Sarah, is it true you're trying to kick your parents out of their home? It's not their home, Aunt Linda. It's Grandma Margaret's. Dad lied and he pushed Sophie. Michael would never. I have a recording. Silence. Then what? I sent her the 47-second voice memo. The one with my property and not even blood and ungrateful. I didn't say anything else. I just sent it and waited. 3 minutes later, Linda texted back 2 words. Oh God. One recording. One truth. And suddenly the gaslighting stops. The denial crumbles. Because facts don't care about your feelings. They just destroy lies. And now? Now we're heading toward the moment that changes everything. The family meeting. Where my grandmother walks in like a teacher ready to teach a very hard lesson. This is the part that will make you cheer. Stay with me. 2 of my cousins unfriended me on Facebook that week. My great-aunt Patty sent a message that said, "You're tearing this family apart over a chair." I didn't respond. I didn't post. I didn't argue. Brooke had texted 23 people. I sent one recording to one person. Receipts don't need an audience. They need the right ears. January 2nd, the same day my father received the letter and started screaming. While he was calling lawyers and threatening lawsuits, I was in a waiting room in Glastonbury with magazines from 2022 and a fish tank that hummed like a meditation app. Sophie was behind the closed door with Dr. Amara Singh. 45 minutes. I sat in the blue vinyl chair and stared at the fish, a fat orange one going in circles, and tried not to think about what my daughter might be saying in there. When the door opened, Dr. Singh asked Sophie to pick a sticker from the treasure box in the corner, then stepped into the hallway with me. She was small, composed, the kind of person who speaks like every word has been weighed on a scale first. "Sophie asked me something today," she said. "She asked me if she's real." My heart shattered. She said her grandfather has been telling her she's not a real grandchild for years. Not just Christmas. She said the other kids at family events repeat it. Not real. Not blood. Not one of us. She's been carrying that much longer than you think. I pressed my back against the hallway wall. The fluorescent light buzzed above us. "She is resilient," Dr. Singh said. "But she needs to hear from the actions around her, not just words, that she belongs. She will understand through what you do, not what you say." On the drive home, Sophie sat in the back seat, peeling the edges of her sticker. "A purple triceratops," she said without looking up. "Dr. Singh told me feelings aren't wrong or right. They just are." "That's true, baby. Then is it okay that I'm mad at Grandpa?" My throat tightened. "It is absolutely okay. More than okay. Your anger is telling you something important. It's telling you that what happened wasn't right. That's your heart protecting you." She nodded and went back to her sticker. I could protect her from a shove. I had. But I hadn't protected her from the words. The years of quiet, daily erosion that taught her to question whether she was real. That failure sat in my chest like a stone. And I swore right there on Route 17, with the heater blowing and the Triceratops sticker half peeled, that it would be the last time I was late. January 15th. The accounting deadline hit like a timer going off in an empty room. Marcus called at 4 p.m. His voice had the particular flatness of a man who expected exactly this. No response from your father. No accounting. No receipts. No communication from his attorney if he even has one. The 30-day window for the trust accounting has closed. I was in the break room at the hospital, still in scrubs, eating a granola bar that tasted like pressed sawdust. Through the window I could see the parking lot dusted with old snow, gray and pitted. "What happens now?" I asked. Under Connecticut statute, a trustee who fails to provide an accounting upon demand from the grantor or a beneficiary can be removed by the probate court. I'm filing a petition tomorrow to remove Michael as trustee of the Wilson Education Trust and requesting a court-ordered audit of all disbursements. I let that settle. A court-ordered audit. Every withdrawal. Every fake educational expense. Every dollar that went to Cancun and kitchen granite and designer bags. All of it pulled into the light under oath. "One more thing," Marcus said. "Emma retained an attorney. He called me this morning." He paused. "Off the record, and I mean truly off the record. He told me her position is extremely weak, and he's advised her to settle." I almost smiled. Almost. "And the house?" I asked. The 30-day notice was served December 31st. They have until January 30th to vacate. If they don't, we file an eviction action. But Sarah, I don't think it'll come to that. Your father is a man who can't afford to have an eviction on public record. His pride won't let it get there. I looked at the calendar on the break room wall. Someone had drawn a smiley face on the 30th. 15 days. After 15 years of lies, my father had 15 days. 15 days. One family meeting scheduled. And one grandmother who's about to walk in like she owns the room. Because she does. What happens next is the turning point of this entire story. It's the moment where all the documentation, all the recordings, all the evidence walks into a room and changes everything. In part 5, you're going to witness the moment a family's lies come crashing down. And I don't think you're ready for how powerful it's going to be. Are you ready? Because I can feel this story reaching its peak. Stay tuned for the final part. This is where the real reckoning happens. January 18th. 3 days before the family meeting. My mother comes to the cottage alone. And she begs me. She actually begs me to drop the letters, stop the lawyers, and work it out as a family. But I have 3 words for her. The same 3 words I said on Christmas. We are done here. By January 20th, my entire family is walking into a community room at Maplewood Assisted Living, expecting an apology from me. They have no idea what's about to hit them. In part 5, you're going to witness the moment my grandmother presents all the evidence. The moment my sister realizes she can't defend what she's done. The moment my father's face loses all color. And the moment I finally stand up and say everything I've been holding in for 7 years. You're not going to want to miss this. This is where the story ends and a new life begins. Then Aunt Linda spoke. She'd been sitting at the far end of the table, silent since she walked in. And when her voice came out, it was low and shaking. Not with tears, but with the kind of anger that comes when you realize you've been lied to and defended the liar. Michael, you told me Sarah was the problem. You told all of us. You said she was bitter and dramatic and turned grandma against the family. She held up the bank statement. This isn't bitter. This is theft. Derek and Nathan stood up without a word and walked out. The door clicked shut behind them. They didn't slam it. They didn't need to. Marcus spoke next, his voice level and professional as a court filing. For the record, Mrs. Wilson has amended the Education Trust. The sole beneficiary is now Sophie Marie Thornton. Mrs. Wilson has also issued a 30-day notice to vacate the property at Elm Street. A petition to remove Michael Thornton as trustee has been filed with the probate court. Michael sat down slowly like a man whose legs had stopped reporting for duty. His hands resting on the table were trembling. The room was quiet. Not peaceful. Not resolved. Just empty of everything except the sound of the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. And now? Now comes the moment that will change everything. A mother. A daughter. And 7 years of silence finally broken. This is where the real power comes. This is where the truth becomes a weapon and the weapon becomes freedom. Watch what happens when Sarah finally speaks. Grandma Margaret turned to me. Her small, knotted hand rested near my arm on the table. Do you have anything to say, sweetheart? I hadn't planned to speak. I'd come to listen. To watch. To let the paperwork do what paperwork does when people have spent years lying without it. But my grandmother asked and I stood up. And the words came out the way they'd been waiting to come out for 7 years. Not loud. Not fast. Just clear. I looked at my father. I spent 7 years trying to earn a seat at your table for my daughter. She drew you a painting that night. It was called Our Family Christmas. She drew every single one of you in it. And you shoved her off a chair for it. My voice didn't shake. It was steady. Grounded. I looked at my mother. I paid you $92,400 in rent for a house you didn't own. And when your husband pushed my child onto the floor, you picked up your fork. I looked at Emma. You took $18,000 that was meant for my daughter's education. And then you sent a group text to 23 people telling them I was the one stealing. I stopped. Let the silence sit. Let it fill the room like water. I looked at my father one last time. I don't negotiate with people who push children. Sophie and I are done. I sat down. Under the table, Grandma Margaret's hand found mine. She squeezed once. Firm. Deliberate. The grip of a woman who'd raised 2 generations and wasn't finished yet. No one in that room said a word. The next 10 days moved with the slow, grinding certainty of paperwork doing its job. January 30th, vacate day. Marcus confirmed it by text at 6 p.m. They're out. Confirmed with the neighbor. Moving truck left at 4 p.m. Michael and Catherine relocated to a 2-bedroom apartment in Meriden. $1,800 a month. The first rent check either of them had written in 15 years. My father didn't fight it. Marcus was right. Michael was a man who'd spent a lifetime building an image, and an eviction filing on the public record would have cracked it like a hammer through a window. He went quietly. That was the most dignity he'd shown in months. Second week of February, the probate court granted the petition to remove Michael as trustee. The judge's order was 3 pages long and included the phrase failure to fulfill fiduciary duties. Marcus Webb was appointed successor trustee by Grandma Margaret. Trust balance at transfer, $11,340 plus a $40,000 deposit from Grandma Margaret's personal savings. Sophie's education fund, $51,340. Her name finally on the first page. Third week of February, the DCF investigation concluded. Finding indicated. The caseworker's report documented the physical contact, the bruise, the medical report, and the 14 witnesses who did nothing. Michael was mandated to complete an anger management program. Failure to comply could result in a restricted contact order. Marcus sent my father a final demand. Repayment of $14,200. 12 months of rent. The maximum recoverable under the settlement Grandma Margaret agreed to in order to end it cleanly. Michael had 60 days. The cashier's check arrived in 43 days. $14,200. It wouldn't replace what those years cost, but it would put 6 months of rent in a savings account with Sophie's name on it. Emma held out longer than my father, but receipts don't care about stubbornness. First week of March, Marcus in his capacity as successor trustee sent a formal demand to Emma. Repayment of $18,660 in unauthorized trust withdrawals. The letter outlined 2 options. Option 1. Full repayment on an agreed schedule. Option 2. A civil lawsuit filed by the trust for breach of fiduciary duty, with Michael named as co-defendant for authorizing the disbursements and potentially a fraud referral for misrepresenting personal expenses as educational costs. Emma's attorney called Marcus within 48 hours. They settled in mid-March. $60,000 payable at $2,500 per month over 24 months. It wasn't the full amount, but Grandma Margaret approved it. I want the money back for Sophie, she told Marcus. I don't want a war. Wars are expensive and they break the things you're trying to save. Every monthly payment would go directly into Sophie's education trust. I heard through Aunt Linda, who had quietly stopped returning Emma's calls, that Emma sold her Lexus and replaced it with a used Honda. The summer trip to Turks and Caicos was canceled. And Kevin, Emma's husband, had apparently discovered the scope of the withdrawals for the first time when the demand letter arrived. Aunt Linda said the word she used was blindsided. I didn't feel satisfaction. I want to be honest about that. I didn't feel the rush that people in movies feel when the villain falls. I felt tired and I felt clear. And I felt something close to relief. The way you feel when a bone is finally set after weeks of walking on it wrong. I told Marcus the same thing I told myself. I don't want Emma to suffer. I want Sophie to have what was always hers. March 14th. Marcus sent the email on my behalf. 1 paragraph addressed to Michael, Catherine, and Emma. Clean as a surgical note. I am requesting that you have no direct contact with me, or with my daughter Sophie until further notice. Any necessary communication should be directed to my attorney, Marcus Webb, at the address and number below. I didn't explain why. I didn't list grievances. I didn't leave the door open with phrases like maybe someday, or when we're all ready. I just drew the line and stood behind it. Michael responded by mail, not through Marcus, not through email, but through a handwritten letter slipped into the cottage mailbox. I recognized the handwriting, the same sharp slant he used on birthday cards when he remembered to send them. 4 lines. You destroyed this family. I hope you're proud of yourself. Your mother cries every night. This isn't over. I read it once, folded it, placed it in the manila folder. Did not respond. In April, Catherine sent Sophie a birthday card. Pink envelope. Inside, 3 words in her looping cursive. Love Grandma C. No mention of Christmas. No mention of the floor. No mention of anything that would require acknowledging what had happened. I held the card for a long time, sitting on the edge of my bed after Sophie had gone to sleep. Part of me wanted to give it to her. The part of me that had spent 7 years believing any connection was better than none. I put it in a drawer instead. Not forever. Just not yet. No contact wasn't punishment. I want to be clear about that. It was the first boundary I'd ever drawn that I actually kept. It wasn't a wall built from anger. It was a door closed gently with a lock I chose not to hand the key to. Like the oxygen mask on an airplane. You put yours on first so you can breathe long enough to help the person beside you. And now comes the beautiful part. The part where a mama and her daughter build a life that's entirely their own. Where boundaries become freedom. Where silence becomes peace. Stay with me for the ending. Because this is where Sophie learns what belonging really means. May. Connecticut in May smells like mud and cut grass, and the particular sweetness of apple blossoms opening along the fences on Elm Street. We moved into the main house on the first Saturday of the month. Grandma Margaret insisted. "It's your home now," she said when I tried to argue. It always should have been. Marcus was handling the deed transfer. A gift deed from Margaret Wilson to Sarah Thornton. Clean and legal and real. After 15 years of my father calling it his, the house would belong to someone who'd never once claimed to own something she didn't. Sophie chose the upstairs bedroom with the window overlooking the backyard. She stood in the doorway for a full minute just looking. It was 3 times the size of her room in the cottage. Light poured through the glass and hit the hardwood floor in wide yellow stripes. "This is mine," she said. Her voice was different. Certain. "This is yours," I said. She hung one thing on the wall that first day. The painting. Our family Christmas. The watercolor from that night. Edges soft from where it had hit the floor. One corner slightly creased from being carried to the car in the cold. She smoothed it flat and pressed a piece of tape on each corner. She still saw Dr. Singh every 2 weeks. One afternoon in late May, she came out of her session and said to me in the parking lot with the sun on her face and her backpack hanging off one shoulder, "Dr. Singh says I don't have to earn belonging. I just belong." I cried right there next to the car in broad daylight for the first time since Christmas. Not sad tears. Released tears. Finally understood what it meant to be whole again. Grandma Margaret visited every Sunday. They baked. They painted. They read together on the porch while the bees worked the garden. Margaret called her my girl. Sophie called her great-grandma Margaret. The education trust stood at $51,340. Growing by $2,500 every month. Enough by the time Sophie turned 18 for a future she could choose for herself. June. A Tuesday evening. Warm enough to leave the kitchen window open. I was at the stove, wooden spoon in hand, steam rising from a pot of the pasta Sophie liked. The kind with the little bow ties because she said they looked like butterflies. The backyard was gold. Birch trees catching the last of the light. A cardinal on the fence post, head tilted, watching nothing. Sophie came in from the living room at a run, socks sliding on the hardwood, and wrapped her arms around my waist from behind. She pressed her face into my back, and I felt her breathe. "Mommy," she said, "am I really yours forever?" The question. The same one she'd asked 100 times. The one I'd always answered the same way. Forever and always. Quick. Automatic. A reflex like catching a ball. But this time I turned the burner down. I set the spoon on the counter. I crouched until we were eye to eye, her hands in mine. And I gave her a different answer. A better answer. A true answer. You are mine and I am yours. And this house is ours. And nobody gets to tell you different. She smiled. Not the careful smile she used at my father's table. The one that asked permission. Not that smile. A real smile. Wide and unguarded. The kind that starts in the eyes and doesn't stop. I hadn't seen that smile since before Christmas. Later, after she was asleep, I walked past her bedroom. The door was cracked open. The hallway light fell across the wall where the painting hung. Our family Christmas. But it was different now. She'd added to it. New figures in bright gouache beside the original. Dana and Sophie. A small woman in a wheelchair. Grandma Margaret. A lady with dark hair. Dr. Singh. A man in a blue blazer. Marcus. The people who showed up. The people who stayed. The people who never once asked her to prove she was real. No Michael. No Catherine. No Emma. Smaller family. Truer one. I leaned against the doorframe and listened to my daughter breathing in a room that was hers, in a house that was ours, in a life we'd built, Not from silence, but from the moment I finally broke it. Family isn't the people who gave you a chair at their table. It's the people who'd never take yours away. That's my story. Mine and Sophie's. The final message. I want to say something directly to you right now. If you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your child safe, I hope this gave you permission to choose your child every single time. Every single time. Tell me in the comments. And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Because every child deserves someone who says we are done here and means it. Someone who picks them up off the floor and doesn't put them back down until they're standing on solid ground. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for listening. And if this story touched you, please share it. Because somewhere out there, someone needs to hear that they're not crazy. That their family's lies don't define their reality. That documentation matters. That boundaries save lives. That love is in silence. Love is the willingness to say no. You don't have to earn love. You don't have to prove you belong. You just belong. And the person who finally tells you that, hold them close. Because they're the real family.